Part 1, Sitting with Suffering, the path begins here. There are mornings when you wake up and everything feels hollow. The sun still rises, the air still moves, but somewhere deep inside, the light has gone out. The things that once mattered no longer stir your heart. The roles you played, the goals you chased, the people you once held close, they feel distant now, as if belonging to someone else, in another life. You look around and feel an ache you can't quite name. You're breathing, but you're no longer alive in the way you used to be. That is what we call being stuck. But this moment, as bleak and empty as it may seem, is not a mistake. According to the Buddha, it may be one of the most important moments of your life. You see, the Buddha didn't begin his path by promising happiness or comfort. He began by stating a simple truth, one that echoes across time and culture: there is suffering. Life contains suffering not as a flaw, not as punishment, but as a fact of existence. Birth is suffering. Aging is suffering. Loss, frustration, confusion, uncertainty, all of it is part of the human experience. And yet, strangely, we are taught to run from it. Society tells us to push through, to stay positive, to distract ourselves, to succeed our way out of pain. But the Buddha offered something radically different. He asked us to stop running. He asked us to sit down with our suffering, to meet it fully, face to face. Not to drown in it, but to understand it. Because only by understanding suffering can we be free from it. When life feels stuck, we often scramble for answers. Why is this happening? What did I do wrong? How can I fix it? We blame ourselves, we blame others, we cling to the past or fear the future. But the Buddha pointed to something deeper. He said that suffering arises not because life fails to give us what we want, but because we crave life to be something it cannot be. We want permanence in a world of impermanence. We want control in a reality that is constantly shifting. We want guarantees, certainty, and lasting satisfaction. But existence doesn't work that way. We are stuck not because the path has ended, but because we refuse to let go of the idea that it should always go forward, always be clear, always feel good. Yet in clinging to that fantasy, we miss the deeper truth: life is always moving, always unfolding, just not always in the direction the ego desires. This is where the Buddha's wisdom becomes medicine. He taught that craving, tanha, is the root of our pain. It's the thirst that can never be quenched. The more we grasp, the tighter we hold on, the more we suffer. And when life doesn't cooperate, when the job disappears, the relationship falls apart, the meaning dries up, we feel betrayed. But perhaps life isn't betraying us at all. Perhaps it's trying to show us something. Because what is stuckness, really? It's the moment we can no longer distract ourselves. It's the stillness that arises when the usual tricks stop working. And in that stillness, we are finally forced to look. To see. To question. And when we do, we begin to glimpse another truth: everything is impermanent. The pain you're feeling, it will pass. The confusion, the heartbreak, the exhaustion, they are not forever. They rise and fall, like waves on the ocean. No matter how strong the storm, it doesn't last. Even your sense of self, your I, your story, is just another pattern in the water. This is the law of anicca, impermanence, which the Buddha called one of the 3 marks of existence. And to see it clearly is to begin to loosen the grip of suffering. Because when you stop believing that what you feel now will last forever, you can stop fighting it. You can simply allow it to be. You can ride it out, like weather, knowing that clear skies will return, not because you force them to, but because all things change. So what can you do when life feels stuck? Start with your breath. That's what the Buddha taught. Not as a gimmick or relaxation technique, but as a doorway back to presence. When you feel lost in thought, when anxiety chokes your chest, when despair floods your mind, return to the breath. Not to escape the moment, but to fully arrive in it. Inhale. Know that you are inhaling. Exhale. Know that you are exhaling. That's it. That's the practice. And it works not because it solves all problems, but because it interrupts the trance of suffering. It brings you back from the imagined past and the feared future. It returns you to this one breath, this one body, this one moment where freedom is always waiting. The Buddha never promised a life without hardship. What he offered was something greater, a way to suffer wisely. To feel everything, but not be consumed by it. To understand the roots of your pain, so that you no longer water them unconsciously. To walk through fire without being burned, because you see it for what it is, just fire, not punishment, not failure, not the end. No one can walk this path for you. Not even the Buddha himself. Be a lamp unto yourself, he said. Walk your own path, with mindfulness as your guide. When life feels stuck, maybe it's not asking for a solution. Maybe it's asking for your presence. For your willingness to feel. To stay. To breathe. To listen to the silence between the questions. Because sometimes, when we stop demanding answers, something else arises, clarity. Not from outside, but from deep within. So sit with your stuckness. Let it speak. Let it teach. Let it pass. And as it does, you may just discover that the path never disappeared. It was always there, beneath your feet, waiting for you to see it. Part 2, The Illusion of Progress and the Power of Stillness. We are raised with a certain myth, that life is a straight line. That it moves from point A to point B, from lower to higher, from confusion to clarity, from brokenness to wholeness. We are told to set goals, climb ladders, chase success, find our purpose, and never stop growing. Stagnation is treated like failure. Slowing down is weakness. Stillness is suspect. But the Buddha didn't speak of life as a ladder. He spoke of it as a wheel. The wheel of samsara. The wheel of becoming. A circle that turns endlessly as long as craving and ignorance continue to fuel it. And sometimes, that will turns in ways that feel forward, love, energy, growth. Other times, it turns toward loss, disillusionment, despair. But it is all part of the same movement, the cycle of birth and death, of becoming and undoing. So when life feels stuck, it may not be because you've failed to grow. It may be because life is turning you inward. Not backward. Not downward. Just inward. And inward is the one place we are never taught to go. We are conditioned to seek change outside, a new job, a new place, a new person, a new belief system. But in the Dhamma, the Buddha's teachings, change begins from the inside out. The outer world is not the cause of our suffering. It only reflects it. We suffer not because things are bad, but because we are grasping for things to be different. We suffer because we believe that fulfillment lies somewhere else. But what if it doesn't? What if the peace you are seeking is already here, but you are too busy running to notice? This is where the Buddha offers a different kind of medicine, not movement, but stillness. Not fixing the world, but understanding the mind. Because if the wheel of becoming keeps turning due to craving, then stillness is the radical act that breaks the cycle. Stillness is not inaction. It is pure attention. It is sitting down in the center of your own storm and saying, "Let me see clearly." Not to analyze or control, but simply to see. The Buddha himself found awakening not by traveling to some exotic place or achieving some external mastery. He awoke beneath a tree, in the stillness of his own being. After years of striving, he stopped. After years of seeking answers from others, he turned within. And there, in the silence, in the raw presence of his own breath and body, he saw the truth. That same stillness is available to you. Not when everything is perfect. Not when you've solved all your problems. But right now, in the very heart of your confusion. There's a story in the Pali Canon about a man pierced by an arrow. He comes to the Buddha and says, "Tell me who shot the arrow. What was their caste, their motive, their background?" The Buddha replies, "If a man is shot, and before removing the arrow he insists on knowing all the details, he will die before he learns the answers. What matters first, the Buddha said, is removing the arrow. And in this case, the arrow is suffering. When you are stuck, when your heart feels numb, your body tense, and your spirit tired, don't try to make sense of everything right away. Don't demand answers. Don't search for meaning where the wound is still fresh. Just recognize the arrow. Feel it. And gently begin the process of loosening its grip. You may be surprised to find that the arrow was not what you thought. Not a failed career. Not a broken relationship. Not even the fear of the future. It was something subtler, the refusal to allow things to be as they are. That's where stuckness gets its power, from our resistance to this moment. We believe that if we accept what is, we are giving up. But in the Dhamma, acceptance is not surrender. It is wisdom. It is saying, this is here. This is what life is asking me to feel right now. Let me meet it fully. Sometimes what appears to be stillness is actually transformation. Think of a seed underground. It looks like nothing is happening. But inside, everything is shifting. The shell is cracking. The roots are reaching. Something is beginning. The darkness is not the end, it is the beginning of depth. The Buddha taught that all compounded things, thoughts, emotions, events are subject to birth and death. Nothing lasts. That includes your current state of confusion. That includes your sense of failure. Even your idea of who you are is not permanent. It is conditioned, arising out of causes and conditions that can be seen and released. So what does this mean, practically? It means you don't have to force your way out of stuckness. You can observe your way through it. You can watch it, breathe with it, soften around it. Let it speak. Let it tremble. Let it settle. Because beneath the noise of the mind, there is something deeper. The Buddha called it, the unborn, the unconditioned, the deathless. It is not a place. It is a quality of awareness that is not touched by the ups and downs of the world. It is not something you gain. It is what you are when you stop clinging to everything you are not. When you're stuck, you are actually being invited to touch this awareness. Not to escape life, but to be finally present with it. In the pauses. In the quiet. In the breaking down of who you thought you were supposed to be. There is a kind of grace that only arrives when everything else falls away. And so, the next time you feel like you've lost your way, try not to panic. Don't race to fix it. Don't label it a failure. Just breathe. Just be still. Just remember. The path does not always look like progress. Sometimes, it looks like stopping. Sometimes, it looks like silence. And sometimes, it looks like falling apart. But underneath all of it, there is movement. A deeper unfolding. A turning inward that is not the end of the journey, but the beginning of truth. Part 3, the self that cannot be saved. When life feels stuck, a deeper question often emerges beneath the surface of our discomfort. Who am I, if I am no longer who I used to be? At first, the feeling of being stuck appears situational. A job loss. A breakup. A health scare. A period of listlessness. But if you sit with it long enough, without distracting yourself, without rushing to fix it, you begin to see something more fundamental is being unraveled. The story of you is beginning to break down. And that can be terrifying. We've spent most of our lives building this identity, adding titles, collecting memories, accumulating successes, surrounding ourselves with roles and people who reinforce the narrative of who we think we are. But every identity is a fragile construction. It rests on constantly shifting conditions, relationships, achievements, appearances, opinions. We need them to stay intact, or else we begin to fear we are disappearing. But in the Buddha's teaching, this fear of disappearance is not a problem. It is a doorway. Because the self that we are afraid of losing, the self that feels stuck, unworthy, behind, broken, is not who we truly are. It is a bundle of habits. A stream of thoughts. A collection of reactions and attachments, conditioned by causes we barely understand. The Buddha used a striking image to describe the self. He said it is like a chariot made of parts, the wheels, the axles, the frame, the reins. When you take the parts away, where is the chariot? In the same way, when you take away the body, sensations, perceptions, mental formations, and consciousness, what is left to call I? This is not a theory. It is a truth you can begin to taste whenever life strips you down. When what you clung to for identity is no longer available, when the relationship ends, the body ages, the roles fall away, you are not losing your life. You are being invited to see through the illusion. Not to become nothing, but to discover what was never born, and can never die. The teachings on anatta, non-self, are among the most misunderstood in Buddhism. Some believe it means we are empty or insignificant. But this is not the Buddha's meaning. The insight of non-self is not nihilistic. It is liberating. Because it says, if you are not your thoughts, your past, your emotions, then none of those things can imprison you. You are not stuck. You are only clinging. When we say, I feel lost, what we usually mean is, the person I thought I was no longer fits. That's not a crisis. That's growth. That's the shedding of false identities. And in the space that opens, something new can emerge, not a better self, but a freer one. The Buddha taught that suffering arises when we cling to what is impermanent and mistake it for who we are. But when we see the impermanence clearly, suffering begins to unravel on its own. We no longer fight to maintain the illusion. We allow ourselves to fall apart, not as a failure, but as an act of surrender. This falling apart is not the end. It's how the truth gets in. There's a tenderness in this process. You may feel raw, exposed, vulnerable. The stories you once told yourself may no longer hold up. The people around you may not understand what you're going through. But this too is part of the path. In solitude, in silence, in the stripping away of everything non-essential, you begin to sense something deeper than personality or preference. Something wordless. Something still. A kind of presence that doesn't need to be anyone, doesn't need to go anywhere, doesn't need to prove anything. This presence is your true refuge. The Buddha never said to become someone else. He said to see clearly what you are not. And in that seeing, the illusion drops away, not through force, but through wisdom. Not by constructing a better identity, but by ceasing to identify with what is passing. You cannot save the self, because the self you're trying to save is only an echo. But you can be free of it. You can be still enough to see the dance of thought, emotion, memory, all coming and going like clouds in the sky. And you can rest in the sky itself, unmoved, infinite, untouched. So if you are feeling lost, remember. You are not lost. The self that feels lost is just a story that's no longer useful. Let it go. Let it dissolve. You may just find that beneath the collapse is clarity. That beyond the stuckness is space. That in the absence of the self. What remains, is freedom. Part 4, The Path Beyond Struggle, Practice in the Midst of Life. When the mind is tangled, when the world feels distant, when nothing seems to move, what then? If there is no self to fix, no identity to protect, and no permanent solution to reach, how do we live? What do we do with our days when progress no longer pulls us forward? This is where the Buddha's teaching shifts from insight to practice. Not in the grand sense of becoming a monk or fleeing the world, but in the quiet, deliberate way of living each moment as it is, no longer as a problem to solve, but as a path to walk. The Buddha never offered a single dramatic solution. What he offered instead was a gentle yet radical framework, the Noble Eightfold Path. Not as a doctrine, but as a way of seeing and living that turns everyday life into the ground of awakening. This path doesn't require perfection. It doesn't demand enlightenment in a day. It asks for presence, for honesty, for the humility to begin where you are. Right view. Right intention. right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, right concentration. Each of these steps is a return to the real, a softening of the ego, a quiet honoring of truth, moment by moment. When you are stuck, when the mind spins and the heart sinks, this path becomes not just a theory, but a lifeline. You don't need to believe in anything. You don't need to have it all figured out. You only need to take one honest step and then another. That might mean noticing your speech today, how many times you speak from fear instead of clarity. It might mean observing how you reach for distractions when silence arises. It might mean sitting in meditation, not to achieve anything, but to practice being with what is. To feel the breath. To feel the ache. To feel the rawness without fleeing. This is not passivity. It is a fierce kind of compassion, to remain present with your own suffering, to hold it without flinching, and to choose not to act from it blindly. This is the essence of right effort, not to force the mind, but to gently redirect it. To catch it when it spirals into self-pity or anger or despair, and lovingly guide it back. Not out of shame, but out of care. Because you know, whatever you water, grows. And so you water mindfulness. You water patience. You water courage, even when it trembles. In this way, spiritual practice becomes something very different from what many expect. It is not an escape from life, but a deep and conscious embrace of life, not only in its joys, but in its struggles, its silence, its messiness. The Buddha never asked us to transcend the world. He asked us to see it clearly. And in seeing it clearly, to cease grasping at its illusions. When life is stuck, it's easy to wait for something to change before we begin again. But the Buddha's path doesn't ask you to wait. It invites you to turn this very stuckness into practice. Feeling lost? Practice listening to the discomfort without trying to fix it. Feeling anxious? Practice resting attention on the breath, not to banish fear, but to hold it gently. Feeling unmotivated? Practice right action in small ways, washing a dish mindfully, writing a kind word, sitting down to meditate even when you'd rather run. The beauty of this path is that it meets you exactly where you are. You don't have to be ready. You don't have to be pure. You don't have to feel spiritual. You only have to be willing to stay, to notice, and to walk with care. Because stuckness, too, is ground for awakening. Restlessness is a teacher. Loneliness is a mirror. Confusion is the beginning of clarity, not its opposite, but its prelude. When you stop struggling to escape what is, the mind begins to soften. And in that softening, something sacred emerges, not dramatic, not transcendent, but profoundly alive. A simple breath. A quiet choice. A small act of non-harming. A pause before speaking. A willingness to feel. These are not small things. These are the seeds of freedom. So if you're waiting for the stuckness to pass before you live again, don't. Begin now. Not with grand ambition, but with humble presence. Start with the next breath. The next word. The next moment of kindness. That is the path. That has always been the path. Part 5, Living Lightly, the Grace of Simplicity. There comes a point when we begin to see that our suffering is not just about what's happening in our lives, it's about how tightly we are holding on to it. We carry so much, ambitions, regrets, identities, expectations, disappointments. Even when we are still, we are heavy. Even when we stop moving, we are burdened. And the more we try to fix our lives by adding more goals, more answers, more explanations, the more entangled we become. But the Buddha didn't teach us to gather more. He taught us to let go. Letting go is not a punishment. It is not about deprivation or denial. It is not about losing what we love or turning our backs on the world. It is about discovering that what we are looking for has never been in the things we've clung to. And from that discovery comes a gentle, astonishing freedom. The freedom of simplicity. The grace of living lightly. We live in a world that worships complexity. The more complex your life, the more important you seem. But the Buddha lived simply. He walked barefoot. He ate what was offered. He slept wherever the forest allowed. And in that simplicity, he encountered the deepest truths of existence, not through study or doctrine, but through direct, unfiltered experience. When you are feeling stuck, it might not be because something is missing. It might be because there is simply too much. Too much noise. Too many roles. Too many internal negotiations and mental loops and emotional clutter. Too much self. The Dhamma is a process of subtraction. It pares down the unnecessary until only the essential remains. And in that essentialness, life begins to breathe again. What does it mean to live lightly? It means not needing to control how things unfold. It means not dragging the past behind you like a shadow. It means not living every day as if you are behind, as if you must catch up. It means trusting that the present moment is enough to work with. This doesn't mean giving up. It means giving in to the natural rhythm of things. It means living with less tension, less demand, less need for everything to go your way. The Buddha called this santuthi, contentment. Not the passive kind of resignation, but the noble satisfaction that arises when you stop measuring life in terms of what's missing. When you are content, even small things nourish you. A quiet morning. A sincere conversation. The way light touches the floor. The taste of a simple meal. You don't have to chase beauty or fulfillment. It comes to you, effortlessly, when you stop running. And yet, this simplicity is not something you can force. You can't simply say, from now on, I will live simply, and expect your heart to feel light. Simplicity is not a new idea to add on top of a cluttered life. It is a result, a natural unfolding that happens when you begin to trust that you no longer need so much. So how do you begin? Start by noticing what weighs you down. The conversations that drain you. The thoughts that cycle endlessly without clarity. The possessions that clutter your space. The assumptions that clutter your mind. The emotional habits that keep asking, what if I'm not enough? Ask gently, not judgmentally. Do I still need this? Does this truly serve peace? Is this helping me wake up, or is it putting me back to sleep? These are not questions of morality. They are questions of liberation. Because each time you release what is no longer needed, you don't just lose something, you gain space. You gain energy. You gain clarity. You make room for life to flow again. There is a kind of richness that arises only in simplicity. It doesn't come from success or from having the answers. It comes from spaciousness. From being able to breathe, inside your own life. Even your spiritual practice doesn't need to be complicated. You don't need to sit in perfect posture. You don't need to recite Pali verses or follow a rigid schedule. You only need to be present with kindness, with honesty. To do one thing at a time. To breathe with awareness. To walk with attention. To speak with care. This is not a lesser path. It is the deepest path. And what happens when you live this way? Something beautiful. You become less reactive. You listen more. You need less approval. You forgive more easily. You make peace with quiet. And most of all, you stop waiting. Waiting for things to improve. Waiting for clarity. Waiting to become someone else before you allow yourself to rest. You realize, this moment is enough. This body is enough. This breath is enough. The Buddha was not promising some distant salvation. He was pointing us to this life, right here, when lived simply, with attention and a heart that knows how to let go. When you feel stuck, don't try to figure it all out at once. Instead, look at what can be released. Not as a sacrifice, but as an offering to your own awakening. Simplicity is not a task. It is a relief. It is the letting go that reveals what was always already here. Peace, not because you've earned it, but because you've finally stopped resisting it. So live lightly. Not to escape the world, but to truly touch it. Not to avoid struggle, but to stop struggling with struggle. To be here, fully, and to know that even the simplest moment, when seen clearly, is a doorway to the sacred. Part 6, Trusting the Timing. Life delivers when you are ready. We often think we are stuck because life is not giving us what we want. We feel as if we've been forgotten, left behind by time, overlooked by the unfolding of destiny. Everyone else seems to be moving forward, finding love, finding meaning, finding success. Meanwhile, we are here, in the same place, again and again, waiting. For clarity. For movement. For something. But from the Buddha's view, life does not withhold out of cruelty. It waits with deep intelligence. Not the intelligence of the mind, which rushes and demands, but the intelligence of Dhamma, the law of cause and effect, of ripening and readiness, of inner alignment that cannot be forced. Just as a flower blooms when the season is right. Just as fruit ripens not by force but by time. So too does the unfolding of our life obey something wiser than our impatience. The Buddha taught that all things arise due to conditions. And when those conditions are not yet met, nothing can be forced into being, not wisdom, not peace, not transformation. To try to hurry life is like shouting at the moon to rise faster. It doesn't work. And it isn't necessary. When you feel stuck, it may be because life is preparing you, not punishing you. Not delaying, but deepening. Not rejecting you, but refining you, until the next step is not just available, but embodied. There's a passage in the Dhammapada that says, like a smith removes impurities from silver, so does the wise person gradually remove their own defilements, little by little, moment by moment. This is the patient work of inner ripening. The world may not see it. Others may not recognize it. Even you may not notice it at first. But beneath the stillness, something sacred is unfolding. Each time you choose presence over panic. Each time you choose truth over habit. Each time you sit in silence rather than grasp for distractions. You are preparing the soil for something true to emerge. And when the time is right, when your heart is ready to carry it with steadiness and humility, life will offer it. Not as a reward, but as a natural result. Because that's how Dhamma works. In our culture, we measure everything in terms of speed and achievement. But in the Dhamma, timing is not about urgency. It is about ripeness. When the mind is still agitated, insight will not come. When the heart is still caught in craving, clarity cannot land. Not because you are unworthy, but because the ground is not yet soft enough to receive the seed. And that's okay. You do not need to rush to bloom. You do not need to force your becoming. You only need to stay close to the present, and to practice trust. Trust not as blind optimism, but as deep surrender to the unfolding of what is true. This is not a passive waiting. It is an active presence. You tend the soil. You water the roots. You remove what chokes the light. And then, you let go. This is why the Buddha spoke so often of patience. Not the patience of delay, but the patience of faith. The patience that understands the organic rhythm of things. When life is silent, it does not mean it has nothing to say. When nothing is moving, it does not mean nothing is happening. When the next door hasn't opened, it may be because you are still becoming the person who will walk through it. So much of our suffering comes not from the waiting itself, but from the story we tell about the waiting. I should be further along. I must be doing something wrong. Everyone else has figured it out. But the path of awakening is not linear. It is not public. It cannot be measured from the outside. Some of the most profound transformations happen in darkness. Some of the most crucial moments come disguised as stillness. So if you feel like nothing is happening, be careful not to assume that nothing is changing. Watch a tree. It does not resist winter. It does not accuse the season of betrayal. It lets itself be bare. It surrenders its leaves. And in that bareness, it receives the unseen nourishment that makes spring possible. What if your stuckness is not the end, but your winter? What if this is the exact pause your soul needs to become honest, to become quiet, to become real? Trust does not mean you will never doubt. It means you do not allow doubt to uproot you from the path. Keep practicing. Keep returning to the breath. Keep walking the noble path. Keep choosing compassion, even when it trembles. Keep letting go of what no longer serves. Keep making space. Because one day, without fanfare, without warning, life will shift. Not because you forced it, but because you stayed long enough for truth to find you. And when it does, it will not feel dramatic. It will feel natural. Like remembering something ancient. Like coming home to a part of yourself you forgot was always there. Because it was never outside you. It was only waiting. For the conditions to be right. For the self to soften. For the heart to be still. So trust. Trust not just the path. Trust the pauses, too. You already deserve it, self-worth beyond achievement. One of the most painful illusions we carry, often hidden beneath our struggles, masked by our ambition, softened by our politeness, is the quiet, gnawing belief that we are not enough. Not yet wise enough. Not kind enough. Not spiritual enough. Not healed enough. Not deserving enough of peace, of rest, of love. It's a belief so deeply woven into our culture, our childhoods, and even our spiritual striving that we rarely see it for what it is, a shadow that follows us, even into the most sacred places. And in that shadow, we place peace somewhere far away. One day, we tell ourselves, when I've improved myself, when I've earned it, when I'm better, then I'll be at ease. But the Buddha did not teach us to become worthy. He taught us to see that we already are. This is not a motivational slogan. It is a radical turning. Because the Dhamma does not begin with perfection. It begins with truth. And the truth is, you are not broken. You are not a problem to solve. You are not behind in some cosmic race. You are a human being, breathing, feeling, changing, just like every other being under the sun. And you are part of this world, not by merit, but by nature. You belong here, not because you've earned it, but because you exist. The Buddha didn't sit beneath the Bodhi tree and awaken to a message of self-improvement. He awakened to the nature of mind, to the causes of suffering, to the laws of impermanence. And in seeing clearly, he was no longer fooled by the illusion that worth is something to be achieved. He saw that all beings suffer because they believe they must become something else to be at peace. But the path to freedom doesn't begin in achievement. It begins in acceptance. This does not mean we don't grow. It means we stop growing out of self-rejection. So much of what we call progress is actually resistance in disguise. We meditate to become better meditators. We practice kindness hoping to fix the parts of us we secretly hate. We strive for insight because we believe enlightenment will finally erase our pain. But what if we stopped reaching for peace as something far away? What if we let go of the constant need to become someone else? What if we simply turn toward our experience, not to perfect it, but to know it? That is where the Buddha begins. In the first noble truth, there is dukkha, suffering. And it is not your fault. It is not a punishment. It is the nature of conditioned life. Knowing this, the path becomes not a race to escape ourselves, but a gentle return. To this breath. To this moment. To this body, just as it is. The irony is, when we stop needing to become someone else, we change. Not because we forced it. But because we finally stopped resisting our lives. A flower doesn't bloom because it's trying to prove anything. It blooms because that is its nature, when the conditions are met. And you too are like that. You do not need to prove your worth through pain. You do not need to earn stillness by performance. You do not need to justify your right to be here by becoming extraordinary. Your worth is not up for debate. Not from society. Not from the voice in your head. Not even from your past. In Buddhist practice, there's a word, saddha, faith. But it does not mean blind belief. It means trust. Trust in the possibility of awakening. Trust that the teachings are not reserved for the special or the flawless. Trust that liberation is possible for you not when you become better, but when you become honest. And the truth is, everything you need is already here. This moment, however quiet or confusing, is the perfect place to begin. Not because you've cleaned it up, but because you're willing to meet it with open eyes and a soft heart. This is the path. Not a ladder, but a circle. Not an escape, but a return. To the breath you're already breathing. To the ground already beneath your feet. To the self that is not a project, but a mystery unfolding. You do not have to wait for some version of yourself that is more enlightened, more worthy, more whole. You are already the ground of awakening. You are already what you've been searching for. And when you begin to trust that, even in small, trembling moments, something begins to shift. The grasping softens. The urgency fades. The war inside quiets. And in its place, there is peace. Not perfect peace. Not constant peace. But a peace that no longer depends on proving yourself. You can rest. Not because your work is done. But because you understand, your value was never in question. Part 8, The Wisdom of Emptiness, Why Nothingness Sets You Free. There is a teaching at the very heart of the Buddha's path, a teaching so subtle, so easily misunderstood, and yet so deeply liberating that, once glimpsed, it changes the way we see everything. That teaching is emptiness. To the ordinary mind, emptiness sounds like a loss. A void. A cold absence. Something to fear. We equate it with meaninglessness, with despair, with extinction. But in the Buddha's vision, emptiness is not despair, it is freedom. Emptiness, anatta in Pali, is not the absence of life. It is the absence of false solidity. It means that all things, our thoughts, our feelings, our identities, our plans, are not fixed, not permanent, not self-contained. They are empty of inherent existence. They arise due to causes and conditions, and they pass away when those conditions shift. This is not a theory. It is something you can begin to see right now. Look at your thoughts. One moment they say, I'm failing. The next, I'm okay. The next, what's the point? But where is the solid self behind them? Look at your emotions. They swell and recede like weather systems. Joy comes. Anxiety comes. Grief comes. None of them stay. None of them define you. Even your body, this intimate sense of me, is in constant flux. Cells die and are born every second. Sensations arise and disappear. What part of this can you truly call I? This is the wisdom the Buddha pointed to, not to frighten us, but to free us. Because once we begin to see emptiness, we stop clinging. We stop clinging to the stories we tell about ourselves. We stop clinging to expectations about how life must unfold. We stop clinging to the fantasy that we are a fixed entity moving through a world of solid things. And in that stopping, a new kind of peace opens, one that is not dependent on circumstances. We discover we are not trapped. We were only holding on too tightly. When life feels stuck, it's often because we are grasping at things that are shifting beneath us. We want certainty. We want permanence. We want to hold life still, to build something that will never shake. But life is not a monument. It is a river. And the more we try to dam that river, to hold on to who we think we are, to force the future to conform, the more suffering we create. To see emptiness is to understand. There is nothing to hold on to, because there was never anything fixed to begin with. Not your identity. Not your pain. Not even the problem you think needs solving. Emptiness does not mean nothing matters. It means nothing is inherently fixed, and because of that, everything is possible. It is not nihilism. It is liberation from illusion. You are not stuck because the world is against you. You are stuck because your mind believes in solid walls where there are only shifting winds. So what happens when you begin to see through the illusion? You stop needing to defend yourself. You stop needing to define yourself. You stop demanding that life validate a story you've outgrown. You become lighter. More spacious. More able to flow with what is. You can experience sadness without becoming a sad person. You can face uncertainty without creating a narrative of failure. You can watch your own thoughts rise and fall like waves, without drowning in them. In the Prajnaparamita texts, the heart of Buddhist wisdom, it is said, form is emptiness. Emptiness is form. This means the very things we see and touch, our bodies, our thoughts, this breath, are not separate from emptiness. And emptiness is not somewhere else. It is the true nature of all things, fluid, dynamic, open. When we stop resisting this truth, we begin to dance with life instead of fight it. And perhaps, this is the final freedom. To be here, in the middle of impermanence, and to stop demanding that anything last. To love without clinging. To strive without tension. To feel deeply without needing to possess. To say yes to the great mystery, just as it is. Because in emptiness, there is space for everything. Space to fall apart. Space to begin again. Space to breathe, without having to become someone else first. The Buddha was not offering us a doctrine to believe. He was offering a mirror, to see ourselves clearly, and to stop mistaking the reflection for what we are. You are not your pain. You are not your past. You are not your accomplishments or your failures. You are not even your name. You are this moment. Open. Aware. Alive. And that is enough. To live with the wisdom of emptiness is to live with grace. Not because everything is known, but because nothing needs to be. You are not here to become permanent. You are here to wake up. And when you do, even in the quietest way, you may find that what once felt like stuckness was never a wall. It was a doorway. A crack in the illusion, through which the light of truth was always waiting to shine. The end of seeking and the beginning of peace. After all the questions, after all the effort, after all the ways we've tried to fix, improve, escape, and become, there is a moment, often small and unannounced, when we begin to sense a shift. It may come not with answers, but with quiet. Not with fireworks, but with a soft breath. Not as a grand solution, but as a simple recognition. I am already home. Not because life has become perfect. Not because the world has given us what we thought we wanted. But because we have stopped running. Stopped running from our pain. Stopped running from our confusion. Stopped running from the ordinary truth of this human moment. The Buddha did not promise us that suffering would disappear. He promised us a way to stop being entangled in it. He promised that liberation was not somewhere far away. It was not in becoming special, or in escaping difficulty, or in fixing the self. Liberation was right here, beneath our feet, in this very body, in this very breath, if we are willing to see clearly, to stop clinging, to soften into what is. In the end, what the Buddha taught us when life feels stuck is not a secret method or a mystical key. It is something much simpler, and much more radical. Come back. Come back to the breath. Come back to your body. Come back to what is happening now. Come back to the reality you've spent a lifetime trying to improve or escape. And look again, with kinder eyes. You may find that peace was never something to earn. It was something to remember. That the self you were trying to become is not as important as the awareness that was always watching. That the problem you were trying to fix was not as solid as it seemed. That the path was not somewhere else. It was right here, all along, beneath your striving. This is not the kind of home that can be seen from the outside. It's not a destination you arrive at and announce with pride. It is the quiet coming together of all your scattered pieces. The forgiveness of your failures. The restfulness that comes when you finally stop needing anything else to happen before you allow yourself to be still. There is a deeper silence underneath the noise. A deeper clarity beneath the confusion. A deeper presence behind the seeking. And the Buddha's greatest gift was not to take us somewhere new, but to point us gently back to what we forgot we already are. Not a name. Not a role. Not a history. Not even a self. Just this. Awareness. Compassion. Emptiness, full of life. A mind, no longer caught. A heart, finally at rest. So if you've been waiting for clarity, for movement, for something to prove you are on the right path, pause. Listen. Let the breath be enough. Let your presence be enough. Let this moment, just as it is, be complete. You have not failed. You are not behind. You are not broken. You are simply on the path of every sincere human being, learning to stop resisting what is, and to begin again, gently, with awareness. This is the real arrival. Not somewhere else. But here. And here, you can rest. Here, you can breathe. Here, you can remember. You are already home.